Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much to Ahli University for the invitation to present today and for the audience. The topic, as you can see, regards how women's representation in the upper echelons in Bahrain public sector. I'm presenting this on behalf of my two co-authors as well, Rawan Al-Dajani, who's a researcher at Derasat, and Amna Tattan, who's also been working with us. And I think neither of them can be here today, unfortunately. So the main research question, Bahraini women, this is a picture of the Supreme Council for Women, which was established in Bahrain in 2001 and represents the first effort at institutionalizing the goal of increasing women's representation and pursuing women's rights in Bahrain. Women, according to the data that they provide, women hold less than 50% of senior government positions in Bahrain. And this is one of the things that the SCW is trying to address. We want to understand the reasons. They are very supportive to the research community's efforts understanding the reasons for this. Now, in Bahrain's ministries, they are led by ministers, obviously, and they have senior officials working underneath them. And the ministers, they don't have total power, but they have strong influence over who the senior officials who work immediately under the undersecretaries and the assistant undersecretaries and so on and so forth. So when a woman is under consideration for a role as a senior official working underneath a minister, the question that we're looking at is, are her chances of being appointed affected by the gender of the minister? Is it more likely that she'll be appointed in a senior position if the minister is a woman versus if the minister is a man? And if there is an effect, then this can help us understand or formulate policies that can further support women, improving women's representation. So why are women underrepresented in senior positions? This is a brief survey of the literature. So there's an undersupply. The first possibility is an undersupply of qualified women. This could be because of the stereotypes that confine women to traditional roles that are away from the workplace. Or it could be because marriage and children disrupt women's efforts at gaining the career or educational qualifications they need to be part of the qualified supply pool. Secondly, it could be that there are qualified women, but they don't want to be, they're not as attracted to the senior positions as their male counterparts. This could be, again, because of preferences for certain flexible arrangements that women tend to have. Maybe they want more flexible, maybe they're averse to travel. Or also it can be due to either a genetic or a socialized aversion to competition and certain other aspects we see in senior positions. The third reason is that there may be qualified and willing women, but they are underhired systematically. And here the reasons are usually unconscious bias or animus. So maybe sometimes it's a man hiring, he doesn't consciously, he's not consciously aware of the discrimination against women, and sometimes it can be overt animus, just people don't want to hire women. So we're looking at this issue from two studies. The first study is we look at the secondary data from Bahrain, appointments in senior positions, and we look at what is the effect of the gender of the person making the hiring decision. So what you can see on the right is there's 5 ministries in Bahrain that there's about 30 ministries in total, but there's 5 ministries that we're focusing on. Why we've picked those 5? Because those are the 5 ministries where since 2001 there has been at least 1 male minister and at least 1 female minister. Those 5 are Ministry of Information, Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Development, and the Ministry of, I always forget the 5th one. There's another one which I'll remember shortly. Excuse me? Social Development, Health, Information, sorry? No, there's only been a woman, no men. We have to have at least one man too. I'll remember eventually. So you can see on the right, that's a chart of the 5. Oh yes, health, housing, youth. Yeah, youth is the other one. That's right, youth. And you can see in that figure the names of the ministers, and the light colors are the female ministers, and the dark gray are the male ministers we've had since 2001. Excuse me? Tourism, yeah. Oh no, tourism, we've only had a woman. No men, Minister of Tourism yet. We've only had one. And we started 2001, as I say, because that's when the Supreme Council for Women was established. And what we're looking at, so we've got the gender of the minister, and then we use the official gazette, which is the document where the appointment of senior officials is reported, to look at the gender of the people. And unlike English, when you look at someone's name in Arabic, there's a very small number of gender ambiguous names. There's no Alexes and Chris's, and it's very few names where you can't tell the gender just by looking at the name. So what did we find? And you can see this table here on the right. If you look at all 5 ministries together, you can see that when there's a female minister, the chance of a senior official appointed being a woman is actually 50% for the sample we have. And when it's a man, it's 33%. Okay, so there's a significantly higher chance of a woman being, well, I say significantly, I mean significantly in the layman's terms, because it's not statistically significant. And this is actually this is not the right statistical model, because this is assuming independent data, which it isn't. But even if we assumed the most favorable statistical conditions, which is this is all independently, identically distributed data, even then, in a simple t-test, it's not statistically significant. But certainly the number is suggestive that Bahraini woman is more likely to be appointed to the position of undersecretary or assistant undersecretary if the overseeing minister is a woman than if they're a man. Okay, and very briefly, the data set is very small. There's only 5 ministries, only since 2001. The first time we had a female minister in Bahrain was 2004. That was Dr. Nada Hafal, who was the Minister of Health. So part of the small size of the data set is because there just haven't been enough time. The way we could expand the data set is by going below assistant undersecretaries to directors. That would be quite labor intensive, but certainly worthwhile. But if this is confirmed with a larger data set, then this suggests that one way of organically improving women's representation in higher positions in the government is to appoint a female minister. So the second study is to look at the reasons for this observed phenomenon. And the way we did this is we did 4 qualitative interviews. We're still doing some more. Hopefully we'll have that figure up in a couple of weeks. With retired senior officials from those ministries. So we find some of those anonymously, because there's not that many, who found 4 women, I should say. There's not that many women who occupied these roles. And we did semi-structured interviews with them, exploring the reasons for this phenomenon that we observed. And we combined this with insights from the academic literature, because this phenomenon is known in other countries. The idea that women are more likely to hire, a woman is more likely to be hired by a woman than she's to be hired by a man. So what were the reasons that we found based on these structured interviews, semi-structured? The first is what we call the network effect, which we found to be moderately important. The network effect is that people like to work with people they know personally, and women know women, and in Bahrain, and men are more like to know men in Bahrain. And here, there's this is reinforced by religious and social norms. So, for example, if a woman is appointed a minister, or whoever's appointed minister, it's often they want the people within their professional network. They'll be the first people they'll look to appoint as their lieutenants, and it's normal in Bahraini society that a woman is more likely to know women, and a man is more likely to know men. As I say, this is religious. Part of this religious, partially social norms. For those of you who are outside Bahrain, then when people socialize, they tend to socialize within their sex. We found that to be moderately important based on the perceptions of the people we spoke to. Secondly, in-group affinity. So by this we mean that women feel a sense of solidarity with each other, especially in these positions, because they understand the difficulties they face, and in the labor market in general, and especially in high pressure jobs in the public sector. And this was found to be quite significant. So there was a sense in which when a woman was appointed to minister, she was much more likely than a male minister to acknowledge and be aware of the difficulties that women face, their need to be flexible, have more flexible working hours, and to have an understanding superior, and so in an effort to, because they're more aware of this, they're more accommodating to their fellow women, and this was found to be quite important. Lower unconscious bias. So, I mean, if men suffer, it's plausible that men suffer much more from unconscious bias against women than do women. That's not to say that women don't suffer from the unconscious bias, but they definitely suffer less. And this was, there was, the interviewees were quite split on this issue. Some thought that, yeah, it's true, women leaders are less likely to suffer from, this kind of unconscious bias. Others thought, no, this is irrelevant because really these decisions are generally meritocratic. So, kind of mixed results there. Then we also looked at from the literature, some factors which might contribute to reversing the effect. So there are factors which would make a woman less likely to be appointed when there's a female minister than if there's a male minister. One of those is what's called the queen bee syndrome. That's the bees. You can see the number 23 there is the queen bee. And this is actually, I think, so British guests, I'll refer to Margaret Thatcher, who's the poster child for the queen bee effect, because I think for the 11 years that she was prime minister, she didn't have a single female member of cabinet apart from her. And the idea here is that women in influential positions consciously hinder the progress of their younger female counterparts for a variety of reasons. And here again, what we found quite mixed results depending on our interview. Some of them were like, yeah, this effect absolutely exists. And others are like, no, this is nonsense. I've never seen this. If it exists, I've never seen it in any of my years working in the government. Another reverse effect we investigated is what's called the prestige effect. So it could be that, and this may explain what Margaret Thatcher was doing, which is that a woman feels as though when she has that important position, people might not take her seriously because of conscious and unconscious bias, and therefore she hires men in an attempt to gain credibility in this distorted environment. But the interviewees were pretty unanimous in thinking that this was not a phenomenon that existed in Bahrain. They didn't think this was important. So, in conclusion, improving women's representation is important. Not just as part of the STDs. In Bahrain, this is something which the government has been striving to do for a long time, and society cares a lot about empowering women. And it is preferable to do it in an organic way rather than in an inorganic way. And by that, I mean having women be hired to positions without it being presented as some sort of PR exercise or some sort of quota checking, box checking, or quota adherence exercise. There is some suggestive evidence from the data that we gathered that having a female minister increases the likelihood that senior officials will be female, but we don't have enough data. And this is due to a variety of mechanisms that operate all over the world, though Bahrain's cultural idiosyncrasies emphasize the network effect and in-group affinity effect. So this network effect is something which is much more prevalent in our region than it is in the Western world, where mixing within sexes, across sexes, and professional networks are much more diverse. We need, however, much more data collection, both secondary and primary. We hope to conduct a few more interviews to round them out, and hopefully we'll have a chance to interview some male retired senior officials, and also to gather secondary data that covers a greater range of senior officials. Thank you very much.